Hi, everybody. I hope you're all doing okay in these crazy times and hanging in there. And thanks for taking the time to join us today. I am Megan Sanish, Senior Advisor at Grace Communications Foundation, and welcome to our webinar on email marketing. This is the fourth in a series we've been doing on digital communications. If you missed our last couple of webinars, get in touch and we will send you the links to the recordings. A few administrative things before we begin. You'll notice that all your mics are muted. They will be for the duration of the webinar. If you have any technical issues or any questions, you can type them into the Q&A. The chat will be disabled for this webinar. You can also ignore the hand function. If you raise your hand, we can't take you off mute for this webinar. We will have a Q&A at the end of the webinar where James will answer any questions that you post. And his email is in the presentation, so you can feel free to reach out to him if you have follow-up questions, or also feel free to email me or Maggie, and one of us can get you in touch with James. Please also note that the webinar is being recorded. Now I'm going to introduce James Saraceni. He's an expert in cause-focused content marketing, branding, social media, digital advertising, and website management, among many other things. And he's spent more than 10 years providing nonprofits with digital marketing and communications support. Many of you may already know him from past webinars or from his time working with us at Grace. And now let me turn things over to James to get us started.
Hey everybody, excited to share with you some information about email marketing. This is really fun for me. I think ever since I started working in an office, I started working on email marketing, sending out newsletters on behalf of nonprofits and for government and things like that. So this is something that I've learned a lot about over the years, but it was really fun putting this together because it sort of taught me some things and had me reevaluate some of my practices. So I hope I can share some of that with you. So we're going to start at 10,000 feet. I really want to start general, talking about some general best practices, and then we're going to go to specifics. All of these are really geared towards elevating and optimizing your time spent doing email marketing, so you save time, so it's easier, so it's faster, and so that you get better results. The first thing we are going to talk about is your results. It's really important to measure results. I've worked with tons of really small nonprofits where there's not many folks on the communications team, much less the team at large. And I know that going back and looking at those newsletters that you've had a rush and kind of get out and then measure their results to compare them is kind of like the last thing on your mind. But it is really important to do this because it will elevate your results. It'll get you better actions off of your emails, better conversions, as it were. And it's always a good best practice. So the major stats you want to look at, and the rest of this webinar is going to be geared to improving these stats. There's not a lot when it comes to email marketing. Really, there's the open rate, the click-through rate, the email list size, and bounces. The open rate is the percent of folks who have received your email and opened it. For our industry, a solid open rate above 20%, or a solid open rate would be anything sort of above 20%. And this depends on a lot of things, right? Your list size, things like that. But if 1/5 of the people out there are opening your email, you're doing a pretty good job. Consider how many emails you get every day, how many emails you just don't have time to read. If 1/5 of folks are actually opening it, that's great. You'll see when you research this that this sort of open rate ideal rate varies by industry a lot, which makes sense. If I'm out there sending out a 40% coupon off for a pair of jeans, that's probably going to get a higher open rate, right, than one asking for an advocacy action. So when you are looking at these rates, definitely try and look at sort of nonprofit cause communications kind of industry or education when you're kind of benchmarking yourself. The second thing that we want to talk about is click rate, right? And so this is a further conversion. This percentage is going to be a lot lower than your open rate, right? Because this is the percent of people who have received your email and then clicked a link within it. So they've not only opened it, but then they've gone through and clicked. And so this rate is going to change a lot depending on what's in that newsletter and how many links are in there, sort of how powerful your language is. So we're going to talk about optimizing for both of these. The other two things are sort of broader, and we're talking about your email list size, right? This is the number of emails on your list. You definitely want to look at changes in that. If this falls by a very large amount, that is a big red flag. You want to get in touch with your email marketing service provider and say, what's going on here? Why am I losing here? And on the other side, if it's going up, that's a good sign, right? So this is sort of a metric that you want to track as well. Bounces. Let's talk about bounces. So a bounce is basically when you send out an email and that email address doesn't receive that email that you sent. There's two types of bounces, right? There's a hard bounce, which means this email address is either incorrect, maybe you entered it wrong, maybe, or it's been deleted, an email address that's no longer valid. A soft bounce is a little bit different. It means that the email address is still receiving emails at some point, or is still a valid email address. It has a landing page or sort of a landing site for your email to go out, but it's not receiving emails at this time. Maybe the mailbox is full, which is kind of less of a problem now than it used to be. Or maybe it's an old email address that an organization still has on the rolls, but doesn't have an inbox for it. So there's a couple reasons why there's a soft bounce. Typically, your email manager will not just remove soft bounces immediately from your list, but it will take a couple soft bounces for them to just basically flag it as an invalid email. A hard bounce typically will just automatically be turned off from your list. And that would be how your email list size drops. Okay, so we're going to be talking about improving your metrics first and foremost. We're going to be talking about open rates. So the main way to improve your open rate is to improve your subject line. And we will get to this in a little bit. Subject line, and I mentioned this later, it's basically the elevator pitch for your email. And it's the way to get people in the door. There's not much else there. It's the front line, the subject line, and then the next piece, which is the preview text. And that's actually kind of a new thing that you can set in the last couple of years. Most email marketing tools now have an ability to do that. And that's basically the verbiage that comes after your subject line. And it gives the viewer a preview of what's going on. So optimizing for that, setting that to really drive people into the email is a great idea. And you can use this and the subject line to play off each other to really heighten people's interest in clicking through. So that's definitely something to check out as well. The other thing you want to look at is improving your content in general. And this sort of may not make a ton of sense, but it does when you think about sort of providing folks this great content over and over again, which will increase over time their willingness to open your email, right? If they've really enjoyed your email every time they've opened it, they're much more likely to open the next one. The other thing you want to do is you want to test different timing to find out the best times to email. So these are sort of like the general recommendations, right? Midweek days, Tuesday through Thursday are the best. There are higher conversions that have been found for Fridays. And so that means there's a higher click-through rate on Friday sometime. I think that probably lines up with people getting tired of working on Friday and being willing to be distracted a little bit more. And then midday times are better, right? 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. are typically the best. Now, the note here is that the optimal times for you to send out your email may not align with these at all. Let's say a key group that you're trying to email are dairy farmers. They're probably going to open emails, if they're opening emails at all during their busy schedule, during a completely different time than people who work in an office, for say, or teachers. Maybe they are at 3 o'clock or way more likely to open your email. So depending on your audience, you may want to change and segment your audience in a way to improve this. And we'll talk about segmenting later as well. The other thing we're going to talk about improving is click rate. And these are some general practices as well, right? Use powerful call to action language in the body of your email. Reduce the number of links in your email. So obviously call to action language, making that powerful, that's sort of marketing 101, right? You want to drive people, funnel people to action. And that pairs along with reducing the number of links in your email, right? If you have 1 million links in your email, first of all, you may get flagged as spam. But second of all, if you have 10 or 15 or 20 links in your email, which actually a lot of us do, because when you look at the bottom of your email, maybe you have like 4 or 5 different social platforms to look through. Maybe there's a sign up to a link. That maybe there's a link to some long-standing content. If you go through and look through your current email at how many links you have, you'd probably be surprised by the number. And by reducing the number of these and increasing the power of your call to action language, you're going to be better funneling people to the actions you want, right? So if there's a big button at the bottom of a large chunk of text that says, hey, click here to sign our petition, you're really funneling people there. You're not giving them a lot of other links to distract them. You're going to improve your click-through rate because people know exactly what you want them to do. The other thing, like I said, you want to have buttons and other enticing design. I mentioned that a little bit. Basically, this is all helping to funnel people to this call to action. And really this click rate is really important for us and for our industry, because that's kind of the point of sending out these newsletters. Either it's a donate now, or it's a sign a petition, take an action, join our event. Those are the big reasons why we're emailing folks out, unless it's really about consumer education and you're doing a series of educational stuff, which is really great and lovely. It's smart to do. Driving these click-through actions is really a big point, right? So you wanna pay attention to doing this. The other thing that I will get into later is segmenting your audience based on interest and shifting the content for these different audience segments to line up with what they want to see, and that can also drive click rates. So let's talk about spam. Again, very general thing, but something we really need to talk about. Oftentimes, you'll hear from, especially, sort of the folks higher up the chain, like, oh, our emails always go to spam. There's a reason that happens, and there's ways to combat this. It's not this amorphous thing out there that sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. There's a reason for this. There are two ways to be flagged as spam. One is because of automated spam filters, which are a little bit hard to control. These spam filters vary by organization, vary by sort of the strength of what IT folks have set. I've been at some organizations where emails that I really want to get are constantly going to the junk folder. And I've been at places where everything comes through, and it's really annoying, right? It's hard to control for that, but there are tips and tricks that I will show you to help with that. The other problem that you can obviously very much control is people manually flagging you. And that's people who don't know you, maybe are not happy with what you're sending them, and flag you as spam. You absolutely don't want that to happen. So these are the two ways that this happens. The biggest thing you want to do to make sure that you don't get flagged as spam over and over again is to make sure that your audience has opted in to receive your email. This is a requirement. You can't just add people to your email list without them understanding that they're doing this on purpose and that they're signing up. It's actually illegal, right? The CAN sort of laws impact this. So you want to make sure that your audience is opted in. If you're collecting business cards at an event, make sure that you mention or have a sign or a flyer with that business card collection drop that says, we'll be signing you up for our newsletter. You want to make sure that people opt in, because if they don't feel that they have, and some people may not feel like they have, even if they've seen that, they're going to flag you. If you get flagged enough, then it's way harder. You're on sort of the spam list, and it's way harder to get your emails seen. So you want to be careful about this. And then the rest is sort of being a good person, right? You want to be on the up and up. You don't want to surprise people. And you want to use well-supported email marketing solutions or platforms, right? These are the big ones that you're probably already using. They're going to have a lot of automation built into their backend that allows for them to keep your emails out of these spam filters. So here's some reasons why you may get flagged. You could have missing information. You have to have your physical address in your emails. It's legally required. And you need to make it easy to use unsubscribe link. You can't put a bunch of stuff in the way of people being able to easily unsubscribe. People wanting to unsubscribe are going to unsubscribe regardless of what you do. And it's important to make this easy, because if not, then they're going to flag your emails as spam a lot, and that is a big problem. The other reason you may get flagged is you have low engagement rates on your email. This entire webinar is geared for you to improve your engagement rates. So we're going to be working on that. Maybe there's a high amount of bounces on your list. So you definitely want to clean your list some if you have tons of bounces and dead emails that you're sending out over and over and over again. You may email too infrequently, and your subscribers may forget who you are. If you're emailing once every 2 months, this is a problem for you, right? You want to email a little bit more than that. Maybe you have a perceived misleading subject line or from address. Actually, there's a couple news outlets in our sort of field right now that do this from address thing, where they change up their from address a lot. That can actually lead to higher spam flags, because people may not recognize the name of the person emailing them, and it's like, who is this? Well, if it's an email from actually an organization that they signed up for, they may not notice that and just immediately move it to the junk filter, right? You want to be careful about your from address. You want to be careful about your subject line. And we'll talk about subject line shortly. You definitely, there's the thing called spam trigger words. These are actually fairly common words that nonprofits use a lot, like free, or like congratulations, or like winner. I use these all the time when I'm talking to students, right? We have challenges. We use this kind of language constantly. As long as you're not using them a lot and using it in a way that like some sort of like seedy marketer would be using, right? Like you should be fine with these. words. And I have a link to all of the spam trigger words at the very end of this webinar. And you can also test your emails using services like isnotspam.com or Litmus to test your emails to see if they run into spam. Okay, so now we're going to talk about best practices. And so these are, again, a little bit more specific. These best practices are more specific to help you do a better job getting your emails open. And the first one that I would really urge you to do is get organized. If your newsletters always sneak up on you, if you're stopping to make newsletters all the time and it feels like this big interruption to your regular work, if you find yourself rushing through emails and then typos get through, we've all been there, it's okay. But if your open rate and click-through rate are stagnant, these are all reasons to get more organized about how you produce your newsletters. It's maybe not the sexiest answer, but by using some of these tips, you are going to be making your life a lot easier, your organization's life a lot easier, and will be increasing the quality of your newsletters, which will then drive clicks and will get you a lot more bang for your buck. We're going to go through some of these options, right? But first, what you really need to start with is your marketing goals. I say this in every webinar, right? If you're trying to do fundraising, donor relations, event promotion, if you're trying to do issue advocacy, community organizing, maybe public education, maybe you're just promoting your work, reports, or events, you're probably going to have a couple of these goals, but align these goals to what you're trying to put in your newsletters. If your newsletters aren't furthering your goals as an organization, you shouldn't be emailing just to email, right? You're wasting everybody's time. You really want to align every piece to one of these items, right? If it's a donor relation thing, you want to make sure that the top line of your email is really talking about building that relationship. You want to be goal aligned. So next, what you're going to do is you're going to build an editorial calendar. It's important to do this. Even a simple one is going to help you in a lot of ways. What you want to do is you want to incorporate the goals that we just talked about into that editorial calendar. So, the second Tuesday or the second week of this month, we want to send out a newsletter that's going to be a donor relations newsletter, right? You want to keep it in that way so that you can spread out across the years, across the year, the ways you want to hit these goals and sort of the different goals you want to hit. Definitely keep your value proposition in mind as you're building this editorial calendar, because you want to be selling yourself in each of these opportunities. And the best way to do these is to start with existing events that you know are in your calendar already. Galas, report releases, announcements, conferences, holidays, things like Earth Day. You know that those are dates, you know that those are out there. You want to include that in your editorial calendar first, and then you want to fill in the gaps with regularly scheduled content. We're talking about donor relation emails, stories highlighting your impact, like an email completely about one person that you've changed, right? Maybe it's blog highlights. Maybe you have a big gap in your editorial calendar. Well, that's a great time to gather together some of the blogs over the last month and put those out. Maybe you want to do a series on advocacy or education topics. These are all great reasons to use regularly scheduled content to fill in these gaps in your editorial calendar. Once you've done that, now you have these dates set out in your calendar where you can see where you're going to be having these newsletters. You have foresight with them and you can plan for it. And so then when you're finally building these things out, here's a couple of more tips that I really encourage you to follow, right? The first rule is make your editorial calendar fit your capacity and not the other way around, right? If you only have 1 or 2 people who have time to work on these newsletters, don't schedule a newsletter every week. Be really conscious and be conservative. These take a lot of time. Doing newsletters well takes a lot of time. So give them the space in your schedule and in your staff schedule so that they can do a good job, right? You don't want to rush through these things. The other thing that you can do once you have this editorial schedule built out is you can build in regular sections of that are going to be in these newsletters. Maybe like a notes from the field section, a tips from an expert section, questions answered section. All of these are really great sort of value add to your newsletters that if you have this calendar already set, you can then set these a calendar for these subsections, and then you can involve your other staff in your organization. Maybe it's a field operational person, right, who's like working with people all the time. Well, if everybody's cool with it and they're fine with it, you can say like, hey, by the 3rd week of every month, could you write me a 250 word blurb about what you did that month that was really cool and inspirational? Well, now you have content being put into your newsletter that you can rely on. You're not sitting there with a blank email template being like, what should I put in this block, right? You have this content that's sort of regularly coming to you, and it will smooth over this process a ton. The other thing you want to do is like leverage your blog's editorial calendar. These things should be tied together hand in hand, right? If you have a really cool blog post that's coming out, include that in a newsletter. Now you have content. You don't have to scramble around thinking about what am I going to talk to these folks about. You have content here. The other thing is don't fatigue your list. Sending out email after email after email. People may get tired of you, tired of removing your email if they don't have time for it. So give people space. And then the final thing I would say, and this may be a little controversial, is don't tie your newsletters necessarily to a day of the month, because nobody out there is going to be sitting there just like, well, it's the second Tuesday and I don't see this newsletter from them, right? Nobody's tying you to that. That's always an internal thing, and teams really get broken up about this, and it's always divisive. Don't do it. Give yourself some flexibility. The second week of the month as a target is a great target. And if things get in the way, if there's a problem or a fire you have to put out, it's okay to move that newsletter back a little bit and still be able to send it out. It will allow you to have time. Then the final piece, we're getting more and more specific, right? The final piece is having a day-by-day production schedule with your team so that roles are very clear. And this allows for everybody to know the dependencies, so that if there's a breakdown, maybe somebody's sick, maybe somebody's out, maybe somebody's on sabbatical, right? You can plan as a team to fill the gap, right? And so you want to create your schedule starting with your delivery date. If I know that this is the ideal time that I send this out this Thursday at 2 p.m., you want to backdate all of these sort of other pieces so that you know when things are due, right? So first off, when is the outline for this newsletter done? Who's going to approve it? Who is writing what element of this newsletter that's going into this outline? Who is picking, designing, and placing the visual collateral, right? Who's going to go and look in the stock photos for that perfect stock photo for the header? Where's this collateral coming from? Who's making it? And then the editorial side of it. Who is editing the content? When are they editing it? You have to have at least one pair of eyes. If you're the only person writing and editing your newsletter, typos will get through. Please have at least one other person. Just give it a quick read over. And then finally, who gives the final go ahead, and when does that need to happen? If Tuesday by 12, we need to have the content in. Wednesday, we need to have X done. Thursday, the final go ahead needs to be done by noon. Then the email is always going to be scheduled out at the time that you're trying to go for. Again, have some flexibility here, but having this outlined in advance is going to make life a lot easier for you. So now we're going to move to improving your subject lines. Again, this is the elevator pitch for your email. Subject lines are really important. They drive open rates. It's probably the single most important thing to get your content viewed. To improve your subject lines, the biggest thing I think you should do is to not sound like a marketer, but sound like a friend. You want to stay away from spammy, clickbait, aggressive marketing language. I recommend this. I mean, you can get away with this just a little bit, but what you really, really, really don't want to do is have people flag you as spam because they're not feeling like you're fulfilling the promise of the subject line, right? If you're saying like, cool, great ideas for da-da-da-da, and those ideas aren't there, or they're going to have to make a second click off, you're probably going to piss some people off, right? You don't want to do that. Don't hit people with these full caps emails or hysterical subject lines. You want to be a friend. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be concerned. You can't be annoyed. You can't be trying to stoke people's passion. That's totally fine. Just don't do it in a way that's like really hysterical or intense, because you want people to open it. You want people to have a pleasurable, exciting, good experience when they're opening your newsletter. Or else they may not do it, right? Like if I'm really stressed out in the middle of my day, do I really want to open an email that's going to stress me out even more? Probably not. But you also want to match your tone. So of course, if you're constantly talking about, impacts and combating climate change, for instance, or something like that, you want to align these subject lines like that. Just do it in a way that's not aggressive. You definitely want to use action-oriented language, right? These are sort of marketing 101 when it comes to these kind of things, right? The same thing is true with all of your ads and things like that. You want to have click here, learn more, take action, sign the petition. Those are ways that are going to drive people to open your email and click. You have to be succinct. The most enticing info should be up front within those first 50 characters. Just think about on your phone right now, how long the subject lines are. They're very short. How long the subject lines are on your desktop. You want to be succinct. Use that sort of old journalism inverted pyramid with the most important pieces up front, because that's going to be the most enticing, and then people are going to click through. You also want to be clear You want to prioritize being clear before being cute or clever. If people don't know what they're going to get when they open your email, they're less likely to open it, right? Of course, you can play around and test this. And that's the next piece here. You want to use segmenting to personalize subject lines, right? And that means I have a segment, an audience who cares about this. I have an audience who cares about that. If you change the subject lines to really fit them, especially around interests, you're going to get higher open rates. And again, you can test your subject lines with A/B testing. Divide your audience in half. Send one subject line to one, send one subject line to another, and you can test sort of their reaction there, right? So those are great ways to improve your subject line. Now we're going to be talking about segmenting your list. I've talked about it a couple times, I've mentioned it, but let's dive into what that actually means. So segmenting your list means dividing your audience into separate lists, and you're going to be using your email marketing solution to do that, whether it's MailChimp, Constant Contact, Network for Good. All of them have sort of a segmenting tool. Either it's called groups or segments, things like that. There are a ton of different sort of vernacular for this, but every single one of those has a way to do that, even if it's your donor CRM, right? If you're using Blackbot or another competitor, there are ways to divide your contacts into groups. That's what we're talking about here. Can you have too many of these segments? Probably not. I would tell you to start big and then go narrow, but having segments will always pay you back, even if they're too specific. It's just an organizational tool. This is entirely internally facing. So you definitely should be using segments. I would encourage you to do that and deal with the organizational task later, right? And you want to segment based on the following. These are just ideas, right? The contact source. How did they come to your organization? How did they come to your newsletter list? That's a great reason to segment them out. Did they come from a conference? What specific conference did they come from? Maybe they came from a survey or a petition. Having that information segmented for each of your audience members and tagging your audience members in that way will allow you to send these varied emails to them and separate them out so that you can get higher open rates. Maybe it's donor level. If you do any fundraising at all, you know all the time that you're separating out your donor list based on the amount of money they've given to you. This is segmentation, right? That's what we're talking about. Maybe it's the relationship to your organization. Are they a board member's fundraising list? That is an important thing to flag, right? And of course, interests. Maybe you've gotten these folks from different interest levels, right? Maybe there was a food waste conference and you would have flagged these folks as people who are interested in food waste, right? That's a great way to leverage your list to really drive those open rates. Of course, location. And then there's other things like statistics. Maybe, and we'll talk about this when it comes to cleaning your email lists, but maybe you want to separate out folks in this way to do some testing. So you want to use segments to do a couple different things. We've already touched on some of these. Improve your open rates and click-through rates. You want to use segmentation to shift messaging to fit the audience. And I really want to hit this strongly. What that means is you're going to take your email subject, right? You're going to have this content. You're going to change the subject line and maybe some of the headers for one audience versus another. Does it sound like a lot of work? Yes, but really it's not so bad. You just take your email, you duplicate it, and when it gets to the send step of your email, you pick one group and then you pick another group for the other. You compare those numbers, you see how much of your newsletter list you've hit, and you're done. It's not super bad. And of course, you can then shift asks to fit each audience. We know how this works when it comes to fundraising, right? You're gonna ask your major donors for a different gift amount or maybe with a different ask than you are for another subsection, right? I just did this at my organization. We had people who attended event versus people who didn't. I messaged to them separately via my newsletters, right? You want to leverage elements of your audience for different purposes, right? Maybe you have a group that has come to you around a very specific issue. Well, now, since they're segmented out, you can hit those folks specifically with a very targeted ask about why they've joined to ask them to do another thing. If they've come to you because they've signed a petition, they're much more likely to sign another one of your petitions, right? So you want to message to them a little bit differently. And of course, you can test your strategies. We've talked about this a little bit. But again, separate your full list out into an A list and a B list that are separated out on pretty standard sort of things. Maybe everybody with this group of last names is an A and this group of last names is a B. Now you can test your strategies. You send A, one subject line, you send B, a variation of that, you see which one's better. And then in the future, you use what you've learned to improve your open rates. And then the other thing you use segmentation for is cleaning your list, which we're going to get to in a second. So how to do this? I would encourage you to look up the instructions for this in your email marketing solution or CRM. If you're paying for your email marketing solution, you probably actually have really good customer service. Get in touch with them. I know people have had different experiences with them. I've had actually pretty good experiences with these customer service folks, and they may even one-on-one walk you how to do your first segmentation. Definitely helps to do this because every marketing solution is a little bit different, so you want to be on point with this. Oftentimes these work with an if then and an and or statement to divide folks out, and it can be a little bit confusing. So what I really encourage you to do, especially as you're doing this the first time, is to start big, right? Have they donated or not, right? Things like that. And then go more specific around these interest-based things. The other thing I would encourage you to do is set up some of these segments right now, and then start already putting your new newsletter signups into these places, right? Did they sign up on your website from a specific action? Well, add them automatically to a group that calls that out, because then you can start doing that and then come back in when you have time to add your old emails in via that into those segments that you've already started out with. It will save you time in the long run. The other thing you should definitely do is check your work. And so let's say you've segmented folks out into 2 separate lists and there shouldn't be any overlap. Well, the great way to test your work is to download each segment into an Excel file, put them into the same Excel file, and use the conditional formatting commands in Excel to line them up and highlight duplicates. If you have emails that have duplicates and are highlighted because of that, that means your segmentation settings may have not been 100% right, and you need to go back to the drawing board. There are ways to test this. This is especially important for folks with 10 or 15,000 people in their newsletter list. If you need to test whether your segmenting works, and it's really important to separate these folks out, this is a great way to check it. The other thing you can do is to pick those well-known contacts that you know how they came to you, they're maybe a friend or a partner, and then check where they land in these segments so that you know, okay, cool, I've segmented out this group of folks. I don't want to be emailing them. I know that they're not because this contact isn't there. Again, go back to your email marketing solution and look up their information on this. They will give you really great information. So now we're going to be talking about cleaning your list. And this is important for a couple different reasons. So why you want to clean your list. Oftentimes it can actually save you money. Many of these big email marketing solutions, like the builders and things, we're talking about MailChimp, et cetera, have thresholds for the size of your contact list that they charge you at monthly. Right? So if you can remove 500 or 600 people from your newsletter list, that might get you below that threshold, so you save money. The other thing this will do is keep you out of spam folders, right? Spammers, they have these huge giant lists and they just hit them over and over and over again because that's how they drive conversions. And so spam filters will flag you if you have 60% of your email list that hasn't opened your email in a couple of years, right? You want to clean that out. This is also an opportunity to re-engage your audience. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but as you're removing people from your list, you want to be messaging them to ask them, hey, why are you dropping off? You know, it's a great way to re-engage. The other thing here is that it's going to improve your statistics so that you have a more accurate read on your campaign's performance. If you have a lot of dead weight in your newsletter list and your open rate is 7 or 8 or 10 or 14%, when you remove that dead weight and you're getting 20, 22, 23, now you see a better fluctuation. When you see, okay, cool, I've changed my subject line a little bit, I've gotten a 5% bump on my open rate. Well, you're only going to see those fluctuations if you remove a ton of this dead weight, right? And so then the other thing is you can adjust your strategy on those sort of elements as well. And the other piece you want to do is you can then pair this with your new segmentation efforts. So like if you're now like, okay, cool, I want to segment my list. This is a great time to then also clean your list because you're doing all this, you're learning all this stuff, it's gonna be very fresh. Okay, so how to clean your list. You wanna filter your list by the date of the email last opened, right? And this is gonna be different for folks. You wanna separate out those who haven't opened in a long time. For you, maybe if your list is like 15 years old, maybe it's 2 years out if they haven't opened your email in 2 years. And what you want to do is you want to look at the amount of folks you're going to be removing from your email list. If you're removing 75% of your email list because they haven't opened it within the last 6 months, you probably want to extend that time period and do a better job of engaging those people. What you want to do then is once you've separated out these folks, right? Like let's say it's everybody who hasn't opened my email within the last calendar year. What you're going to do is you're going to then email these people a series of emails. This is called a drip campaign. We'll talk about this in a second. You can automate it to see if they're still interested and what may have left them uninterested, right? That first email is going to be like, hey, we've noticed that you haven't opened our email recently. You've probably gotten some of these yourself, right? It's an interesting subject line, and may engage people again. Then the next email is hey, we noticed that you haven't opened our email in a while. We're going to be removing you from our list so that we're not wasting your time, right? You can be a little bit frank in these, right? Please let us know now if you still want to receive our emails. I've done this before, and I've been surprised the amount of people who've reached back out and said, yeah, you know what? I'm sorry I haven't, but I still love seeing these emails in. I wish I had time to open them. There are a lot of people out there who are supporting you, who have donated to you, and love seeing that you're still doing things. They just may not have time to open your email, and they'll reach out to you and tell you that. So do a couple of those, and then finally say, hey, thanks so much for your past support. We're going to be removing you from our email list. Here's a link to open us to resubscribe if you're ever interested. And then you've sort of done what you needed to do. It's done, and you can stop emailing those folks and remove them. Now, this changes a little bit when it comes to your CRM for donors, right? If these are lapsed donors, I would really encourage you to spend the time to send a personalized email from your own account. You have their email address, write out that form email, send a batch of them at a time via BCC or however you want to do it, but try and regain them, right? This is like lapsed donor engagement 101, right? You want to get involved with these lapsed donors and keep talking to them. The other thing I would say is then there's also a sort of middle ground section that may still be live, right? Maybe they haven't opened an email in the last 6 months, but they've opened a couple emails in the last year. Maybe you want to send another series of emails to those folks to say like, hey, we noticed you haven't opened our last 5 emails. Is there a reason for that? Are we not talking about something that you're interested in? Are we not doing something you want to see? You will be surprised with what you hear back. This is all a great way to re-engage that list. So then now what I want to talk about is our welcome emails, right? And this is another sort of specific level of advice that I want to give you guys about how to retain those hard-won emails. It takes a lot of time to get those emails, so you want to welcome them in a proper way so that you're retaining them. Because really the last thing you want to do is send, and maybe this is just the way it works up, you've signed up 5 new people and the immediate newsletter in your sort of calendar is a donation ask. Maybe you don't want to do that. So what you want to do is have some of these welcome emails automatically generated if possible to hit them when they first sign up. And I would really, really encourage you to have at least one evergreen email prepared, right? This is the one that says, here's what we do. So your welcome email should match your tone, but it should be lighthearted. You don't want to hit people with the heaviest thing up front, right? You want people to be excited. I've signed up for this new product. It really kind of is a product that you put out day by day. They want to be excited about it. They want to be more informed. They've signed up for a reason. And so you want to match your tone, but you also want to be light and exciting. We're so excited to have you on our list. This is really great. We can't wait to show all of the very cool things that we're doing. Maybe if they're a donor, the things that your money is helping fund. You want to put your best foot forward, and you really want to highlight your value proposition. They signed up your newsletter. You have something to say that other people don't. You really want to highlight that. And the other thing you may want to include, here's some ideas, maybe how to contact your team. Say, we're really responsive. Please reach out to us for this, and this reason. Here's the different folks. Maybe you want to give staff emails, right? Encourage people to have that relationship with you. Maybe you want to share the biggest news of the last quarter that you're super proud of. You could also include things about your newsletters. How often do you email? Say, we're so glad you emailed us. We're going to send you a newsletter every 2 weeks, unless there's something important, and it's going to tell you this, and this news. Maybe the exciting content that they can expect. Hey, we have a report coming up. We can't wait to share with you. And you can also link to your email archive with text like, are you interested in what you've sort of signed up for? Check out these old emails that we're really proud of to see what to expect. This is sort of what you want to do for sourced emails. Let's say you've gone to a conference, you've gathered 500 emails. Good for you. That's awesome. That's an insane amount of emails that you could gather at a conference. What you want to do when you welcome them is to set up a new welcome email and send them an email that acknowledges the source of the list. Maybe it's 10 or 15 people, and just changing that first intro paragraph that says, it was great to meet you at the farmer's market last week. That will really help these folks see that they're not just part of a number, that you care about them, that you're personalized and you're thinking about them and appreciate them giving you their email, which is not something that people are willing to do often. You want to consider this as a sales email, really, and your newsletter content is the product. What is the most exciting part? What do they get that they can't get elsewhere? If people have signed up on your website, they're probably interested in hearing about you. But if you've gathered their email and asked them that you want to email them from some of these other sources, maybe they're participating, and part of that participation in some activity is a newsletter sign up with you. We do this all the time, right? You want to make sure that they're sold on continuing to not just say like, yeah, I subscribe to you to get that free shirt, but now I'm gonna remove you, right? You want to sell them. And you can consider creating a drip campaign with each email, providing something exciting. What is a drip campaign? You'll hear about this. Really, it's an automated series of emails that basically you set this up in the back end of your email solution. Again, look at the support files on how to do that. And it's a great way for you to re-engage folks. So maybe the first email is about a welcome email. The second email is, hey, here's one really cool thing you can do right now to engage. The third email is something similar. And the fourth is this final one that says like, we're so excited that you've joined us. Get ready for our regular newsletters, right? They're really exciting. Here's some examples. That's what a drip campaign is, right? It's automated. It comes out every week or on a certain amount of time, and it's preset to onboard people into your emails. So now what we're going to talk about pretty quickly is overhauling your templates. It doesn't matter if you've emailed people for years and you're a big organization with a ton of staff, or if you're a small organization that doesn't have a lot of time. Setting up these email templates from the beginning has a lot of benefits. It takes some time, but it's a great idea. It will save you time in the long run. It will ensure that your emails don't go too long. These templates allow for regularly scheduled content to have a place so that you're not constantly scrambling to have to build them by scratch every time. It's a great reminder that, oh yeah, every time I send out an email, I've been wanting to highlight my Instagram content, right? If you put that into your email template up front, every time you load a new email, you know, here's the place where I put in that Instagram content. It enables you to quickly update all emails going forward. If you're one of those folks who is constantly going back to an old email that you like the setup of and using that as the basis of the formatting for your new emails, you'll know that you have to change the same mistake that you made or the same thing over and over again. By setting up a template, you don't have to do that. It's done. And if there's a change that you need to make, you just change that template, and then all of your new emails going forward have and reflect that change. It also enables you to be more creative and easily swap around content. And it allows anyone in the organization, if you take a couple weeks off or something, now you have this template that's beautiful, it's well-defined, designed. All they have to do is drop in the content and it's done and it's good to go. Now the difficulties here is it may take some understanding of HTML and CSS to create. It shouldn't take a lot to do that, but if you need that help, you may want to engage somebody to do that. And again, it can be an upfront expenditure of time. So this is what your email templates should do. They should be simple. They should typically be single column. That's kind of a best practice now because so many emails are on the phone. Having that 2-column setup really makes things small. Having a single column, big, sort of large email is kind of the norm now. So maybe redo your template in that way. You want to have your branding front and center. Use the colors, use subcolors that you've had. Engage a designer to help you with this. But you want that logo at the very top. Your email should be recognizable. When somebody opens it up, they should be like, oh yeah, this is this organization that I love. Not why am I getting sort of this random letter? You know what I mean? You want to have your branding there. You want to leverage your email builder CSS tools to set up elements like colors, fonts, headers, backgrounds, footers, and footer content. Play around in your email builder to set this up to make it look nice. Use the drag and drop elements. It will make your life easier in the long run. These companies have spent a lot of time making these email builders better and better and better. They're not great all the time, but they're pretty good. Use them to your advantage. You want to use placeholder text and photos to see what each element looks like in the template so that it's easy to swap those out. Don't just have blank boxes set up, have some placeholder text. Maybe use an old email for this, right? So that you have content and you can see what it looks like. You want to include styling for regularly scheduled sections or content, right? Maybe you have notes from an expert. Drop that photo that you're always putting in of that person in there so that it's ready to go. It saves you time. Include call to action buttons. Have a footer that includes those required elements so you're not having to drop those in and you don't forget. And you want to be mobile optimized. Your email builder should be already, but make sure that you're not adding 3 or 4 columns or something that's going to look really weird on a phone. So a little note about email length. A lot of email clients, especially Google's Gmail, will cut off emails that are too long. I know some really great newsletters that I love that this happens to a lot. You don't want this to happen. So the best way to do that is to shorten your emails. And I would encourage you to use a new template, start from scratch, because HTML and CSS are part of sort of the math that these email clients like Google will use. So if it's this old format where there's a ton of this hidden code behind your newsletter, that will count to the character count of your newsletter and will cut off the bottom part of it, right? So you want to use templates, maybe from scratch, but simplify that CSS and that HTML. If this sounds really confusing, don't worry. Get in touch with if you see that your emails get clipped like this in your test emails to Gmail or whatever, work with your email service provider to sort of figure out what's going on there. So the other thing you want to include in your new template, you want to style regularly scheduled content. We've mentioned this already. So like a headshot of an experts column, fun bullets for weekly tips. Have those styled already. It will save you time because you're not having to restyle them and be like, why isn't this bullet working every single week that you send out your newsletter, right? Fix this in your template. Use section dividers. And the other thing you want to do is maybe include varied content types and styling. There are a ton out there in your content builder. We're going to go through some in a second, but maybe those are image heroes with a header and a paragraph, 2 column options, social media features, things like that. So they look like this, right? Here's a great example of a header image with header text. Over on the right, you can see one where there's this really great call to action button. Build these out in your templates. And if you don't like them, all you have to do is delete them. If you're not going to use them in an email, that is totally fine. Having them in your template allows you to use them. It is very easy to delete these blocks and these sections out so that your email is shorter and concise. But this gives you a hero story, right? You see, watch this and then call to action. You can set up specific stylings. Maybe you want to include a quote. This would be a great way to do this. I don't know if I'm breaking up a little bit. I hope I'm not. But this is a great way to style these elements, style them in advance, and then you're able to use these over and over again. It looks beautiful. You spent the time, you can do it. 2 column options. You can switch these around, right? You can move the photo to the left and the right. Maybe you have 4 or 5 of these in a row. You can switch those photos around to make it look better, right? It looks more engaging. People are more likely to click these buttons. And so the other thing I want to leave you with is some really, very quick right here at the end. I want to talk about merge tags, HTML, and CSS very quickly. These are really sort of next level elements for you, but I would encourage you, especially if a lot of what I've talked about are things that you've already done or already sort of halfway through, you want to think about these. Merge tags are that content that email marketers use to drop in automatic information from your database, from your CMS. From your donor database or sort of your contact solution, right? You can use these merge tags. I definitely encourage you to do that, but be very careful that the information that you're using is really succinct and right? Like I've seen organizations that do this where the first name in their donor database, they have a lot of contacts, the first name, maybe lowercase, or maybe have a mistyping or misspelling because there's so many contacts. Well, now if you're dropping that in automatically, people are going to be turned off, especially if you're using week over week. You want to have good sort of information and be confident with that before you use these merge tags. There's other reasons to use this. If you're interested in doing this sort of automation, definitely, again, get in touch with customer support to walk you through it the first couple of times. And use tests, especially to small segments, or maybe you want to segment out your staff to see if they work so that you're confident with it. When it comes to HTML and CSS, I will plug that you learn these things just a little bit. It doesn't take a lot of time. These are 2 great options for you to learn that. I learned HTML through w3schools.com like 15 years ago. It's an excellent resource for learning HTML and CSS. It will walk you through it. It's much more simple than you think. And why do you want to learn this stuff? It's because when there's those elements of your newsletter that are annoying, super obnoxious, right? Like the lines won't line up. Maybe you want to change the text size and you're constantly struggling with headers and trying to highlight it. And when you highlight it, it doesn't work, or the image comes in weird, it's not the right size. Learning HTML and CSS, very basic stuff, will enable you to fix that very quickly. People are always like, how did you fix that when it comes to these things, especially if you're working with folks? It's because I have a little bit of knowledge of this HTML stuff. I'm not great at it. I have some facility with it, and it really speeds up the process. So invest some time. Lynda.com is another great place to look at. And typically through your library, your local library, they'll probably have access to Lynda for free. I really encourage you to check that out. It's a great way to learn HTML. It will save you a lot of time, both in newsletters and websites, on those weird sites where you're trying to prop up some content for one reason or another, right? Like petition sites, things like that, maybe donation sites, things of that nature. Knowing a little bit of HTML will pay you back. And these are some elements you can commonly use, things like that. I want to make sure we have time for questions, so I won't go through all of these things, but like your headers, the links, this is all very common coding. This is what HTML looks like. If you know how to read this very simply, you can change things very easily and drop these things in. So if you look back at this webinar, I really encourage you to open up a newsletter template or open up your builder and click that little view code button in those text blocks. You will definitely find these types of information, the stuff in this webinar right in front of you right now. In those elements, play around, test it out, go check it out. The last piece of advice I'll give you around this is try this out when you're playing around. Try holding down Shift and hitting the Enter button versus hitting the Enter button in a Word doc or something else. You're going to notice something different. And it's a great way to play around with those text lines. I can't tell you how many times it's been annoying to try and, when you hit Enter and the spacing between paragraphs or between lines is too big, try holding down that Shift button and hit Return instead and see what happens. It will just put that text right at the bottom line. It's a great tip for you to really speed up some process to help you organize your information and maybe deal with some of those weird formatting issues that drive you crazy. Here's some resources to look at. These are some helpful guides. Again, when you look at this webinar, again, you could definitely rely on this. HubSpot, OptinMonster have really great guides and posts. Here's some of the spam testers I told you about. Is that spam? Litmus. And there's links to those HTML and CSS trainings. Okay, cool. So I sped through a lot of stuff. I wanted to leave some time for questions. It looks like we have a bit of time, and I will look to see if we have. Okay, cool. It looks like I've hit most of this information that you may have been interested in. I think I did speed through some things, so I do want to talk about a couple things. If you have any questions, please drop them into the Q&A, and I will definitely answer them. But the couple things that I did run through pretty quickly are those templates. Again, what I'm talking about there with those are basically building out an ideal email, right, in your email builder that has these placeholder text. Use it dividing and developing, use those templates. And like I said, have those set up so then when you need a 2-column, you're not trying to struggle with an email to drop them in and make them work. You have them already and you can delete them out if you're not using them. So we did have one question here. Making your newsletters into your website blog to, if you're an NGO and then the only comms person. Yeah, no, I definitely think that makes sense. Definitely, especially if you're not seeing a lot of crossover or you're not seeing a ton of feedback. So I think the question here is basically, should I take my newsletter content that I've worked my butt off on to create? Should I put that on my website as a blog? I definitely think that makes sense, especially for smaller NGOs. Yeah, absolutely. You're writing content, you're developing content. It's sort of that old thing that I was talking about in the other webinar about social media, right? You take your content, you cut it 4 or 5 different ways. It really speeds up the generation of content that you have. It will save you a lot of time, and there's no reason to not do it. There's going to be a couple of people who may see it in both places. Are they going to be upset with you? Absolutely not. Maybe it's time. Maybe now they have time when they see that blog post. Maybe now they have time to read it. I definitely encourage you to do that. Of course, you want to shift things around a little bit. A newsletter and a blog post are going to be framed a little bit differently. Maybe one is you're using the second person and you're talking to somebody, and maybe in the blog you're not doing that. But I definitely encourage you to do that. That's a super smart idea, super smart question. Cool. So I think that takes us through the end. If you have any questions, here's my email. Please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to help you. You know, I know newsletters and building things like segments and working through those elements can be really tough and difficult. And there's some strategy to think through there. I'm more than happy to help you out with any of that. Just shoot me a line. I'm happy to talk about it.
All right. Thanks so much, James. Any other questions? We'll give it one more minute before the end of the webinar. And just want to say thanks to all of you for joining us in these really challenging times right now. We appreciate it. All right, doesn't look like we have any more questions. So thanks everybody for coming to this webinar. We will have a recording of it if you're interested, and we'll send that out along with a one-pager of information. Thanks, James.
Yeah, no, thank you all. I appreciate it.
Bye, everybody.